Jonathan Roumie takes a deep breath, his voice trembling as he leans forward on the pristine white couch of the morning talk show. "Denzel, I need to tell you about a dream I had 3 nights ago," he says, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Across from him, Denzel Washington's confident expression slowly transforms into something softer, more vulnerable, as if sensing the profound weight of what's about to unfold on live television. The studio lights seem to dim around them as Jonathan continues, his hands clasped tightly together. "In this dream, I was standing in a garden, and Jesus was there with me," he explains, his voice gaining strength. The camera captures Denzel's immediate shift in posture, the Academy Award winner sitting straighter, his weathered hands gripping the armrests of his chair, as something deep within him stirs at these unexpected words. Host Maria Santos had introduced this segment as a simple discussion about faith in Hollywood, expecting the usual polite exchanges between 2 acclaimed actors. Jonathan Roumie, known worldwide for his portrayal of Jesus in The Chosen, had been promoting the show's latest season. Denzel Washington, the legendary actor whose own spiritual journey had been well documented, was there to discuss his upcoming directorial project about biblical themes and modern faith. But neither Maria nor the millions of viewers watching live could have anticipated what Jonathan was about to share. The dream had come to him during a particularly challenging week of filming, when doubts about his worthiness to portray Christ had been weighing heavily on his heart. He had been praying for guidance, seeking reassurance that his work was serving God's purpose rather than his own ego or career ambitions. "In the dream, Jesus looked directly at me," Jonathan continues, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow filling the entire studio. "And he said something that I knew wasn't just for me." Denzel's eyes never leave Jonathan's face, and for a moment the veteran actor seems to forget they're on television. His usual composed demeanor begins to crack, replaced by something raw and authentic that the cameras capture in stunning detail. The audience in the studio has fallen completely silent, sensing they're witnessing something far more profound than typical celebrity interview banter. Maria Santos, a seasoned television host who has interviewed countless stars, finds herself leaning forward as well, her prepared questions forgotten. The spiritual electricity in the air is palpable, as if the Holy Spirit himself has entered their midst through Jonathan's words and genuine vulnerability. Jonathan had always been private about his personal relationship with Christ, preferring to let his work speak for itself. Born to an Irish Catholic mother and a Syrian father, he had grown up understanding faith as something lived rather than merely proclaimed. His journey to playing Jesus hadn't been a calculated career move, but rather a calling that had surprised even him when the opportunity arose with The Chosen creator Dallas Jenkins. Years before landing the role that would define his career, Jonathan had struggled as an actor in New York and Los Angeles, taking odd jobs to pay rent while pursuing his craft. He had often questioned whether his dreams of acting were selfish ambitions or part of God's greater plan. During those lean years, he had spent countless hours in prayer and meditation, seeking divine guidance about his purpose and calling in life. Denzel, meanwhile, had his own complex relationship with faith that few people truly understood. Raised in a Pentecostal household, he had experienced a dramatic conversion experience at age 20, but had kept much of his spiritual journey private throughout his illustrious career. The pressures of Hollywood success had sometimes felt at odds with his deepest beliefs, creating an internal tension that he rarely discussed publicly, but that had shaped every major decision. "Jesus told me about someone," Jonathan continues, his gaze shifting to meet Denzel's eyes directly. He described a man who had been given tremendous gifts, someone who had used his talents to inspire millions, but who was struggling with something deep in his heart. The words hang in the air between them like a bridge being built in real time, connecting 2 souls who barely know each other, yet seem divinely appointed for this moment. Denzel's breathing becomes visibly deeper, his chest rising and falling as if he's preparing himself for something he both wants and fears to hear. His wife Pauletta, watching from the green room backstage, notices her husband's transformation on the monitor and feels her own heart begin to race. She has been married to this man for decades and recognizes the look that's crossing his face. The same expression he wore during their most private moments of prayer together. The dream had been incredibly vivid, Jonathan explains, unlike any he had ever experienced before. In it, he and Jesus had been walking through a garden that seemed to exist outside of time itself, where every flower and tree pulsed with divine life. The Savior's presence had been overwhelmingly peaceful, yet charged with an urgency that made every word feel eternally significant. When Jesus had begun speaking about the man, Jonathan had somehow known it was meant to be shared. He told me this man had been carrying a burden for years, Jonathan continues, his voice growing stronger as he speaks. A weight that he felt he had to bear alone because of his position, his influence, his responsibility to be strong for others. Denzel's eyes begin to glisten, and his legendary composure, the same poise that had carried him through decades of intense roles and public scrutiny, starts to show the first signs of cracking. Maria Santos realizes she's witnessing television history in the making, something that will be replayed and discussed for years to come. Her producer's voice in her earpiece has gone silent, and she senses that everyone in the control room is as transfixed as she is. The usual commercial break notifications have stopped coming. This moment is too sacred to interrupt with the mundane concerns of advertising revenue and scheduling constraints. Jonathan's own journey to faith had been marked by moments of profound encounter that he rarely shared publicly. As a child, he had felt drawn to churches and religious art, spending hours studying paintings of biblical scenes and feeling an inexplicable connection to the stories of Christ's life. His Syrian heritage had given him a unique perspective on the geographical and cultural context of Jesus' earthly ministry, details that would later inform his portrayal. During his years of struggle as a working actor, Jonathan had often found himself in churches during the middle of the day, seeking solace and guidance in empty sanctuaries. He had developed a habit of prayer that was more like conversation, speaking to Jesus as a friend and confidant rather than a distant deity. This intimate relationship had prepared him for the profound responsibility of portraying Christ on screen, though he still felt unworthy of the calling. Denzel, watching Jonathan's face as he speaks, recognizes something familiar in the younger actor's demeanor. It's the same quality he had noticed in his own pastor growing up, and in the few truly holy people he had encountered throughout his life. A transparency that seemed to allow God's light to shine through them, unobstructed. The recognition stirs something deep in his spirit that he has kept carefully guarded for years. In the dream, Jesus showed me this man's heart, Jonathan continues, his voice now carrying a prophetic quality that seems to resonate through the studio. He showed me the love this man has for his family, his genuine desire to use his platform for good, and the way he has quietly helped so many people without seeking recognition. Each word seems to pierce through Denzel's carefully constructed public persona to touch something vulnerable and true at his core. If you believe God sees your heart the same way he sees Denzel's, comment the words, "I believe," below. The veteran actor's eyes are now unmistakably wet with tears, though he maintains enough composure to remain seated upright. His hands, which had been gripping the chair arms, now rest open on his knees, a subtle but significant shift from defensive to receptive. Behind him, crew members who have worked in television for decades find themselves wiping their own eyes, sensing they're witnessing something that transcends entertainment and enters the realm of the sacred. Jonathan had never intended to share such personal revelations on television, but as he had prepared for this interview, he had felt an unmistakable prompting in his spirit. During his morning prayers, the image of Denzel's face had come to him repeatedly, along with a sense that God wanted to use this moment for something greater than promoting a television show. The dream had felt like a divine download, complete with specific details that he couldn't have known through any natural means. The friendship between Denzel and his longtime pastor, Dr. William Coleman, had been one of the most important relationships in the actor's life, though few people knew the depth of their spiritual discussions. Dr. Coleman had been the one to encourage Denzel to see his acting career as a ministry, a way to tell stories that could touch people's hearts and point them toward truth. But even with that guidance, Denzel had struggled with questions about worthiness and purpose that he rarely voiced. Jesus told me something specific about this man's childhood, Jonathan says, his voice dropping to almost a whisper as he seems to be receiving the words in real time. About a moment when he was very young, maybe 8 or 9 years old, when he first felt God's call on his life. Denzel's eyes widen almost imperceptibly, and his breathing catches. Only his family knows about that pivotal moment from his childhood, a divine encounter he has never shared publicly. The memory Jonathan is somehow accessing happened in a small Pentecostal church in Mount Vernon, New York, where young Denzel had been attending service with his mother. During an altar call, he had felt an overwhelming sense of God's presence and had walked forward, tears streaming down his face as he gave his heart to Christ. The experience had been so profound that it had shaped his understanding of his life's purpose from that moment forward. Maria Santos glances at her producers behind the cameras and sees expressions of awe and confusion. None of them know how to handle what's unfolding before them. This isn't the kind of content they typically broadcast, yet it's clearly the most powerful television any of them have ever been part of creating. The usual concerns about ratings and viewer retention have been replaced by a sense that they're participating in something holy and transformative. He told me about the prayers this man prays late at night. Jonathan continues, his own tears now flowing freely as he serves as a conduit for this divine message. About how he wrestles with whether he's doing enough, whether his success has pulled him away from God's original plan for his life. The words hit Denzel like arrows of truth, each one finding its mark in the deepest chambers of his heart, where he keeps his most private fears and doubts. Throughout his career, Denzel had indeed struggled with the tension between worldly success and spiritual calling. Awards and accolades felt hollow when measured against eternal significance, and he had often wondered if the fame and fortune were distractions from what God truly wanted from his life. Late-night prayer sessions in his home office had been filled with this exact wrestling, conversations with God that no one else had witnessed, until now. The studio audience, initially restless and chatty as audiences typically are during commercial breaks, has become completely still. Some viewers are openly weeping, others are praying silently, and many are recording on their phones, sensing they're witnessing a moment that will be talked about for years to come. The spiritual atmosphere in the room has shifted so dramatically that even the most skeptical crew members find themselves moved by forces they don't fully understand. Jonathan's preparation for playing Jesus had involved years of study, prayer, and consultation with theologians and biblical scholars. But beyond academic preparation, he had sought to cultivate an intimate relationship with Christ that would allow authenticity to flow through his performance. He had fasted regularly, spent hours in meditation, and developed such a deep prayer life that friends noticed his countenance had taken on a peaceful, radiant quality. Jesus showed me something beautiful about this man's wife, Jonathan says, shifting his gaze to include the camera, as if speaking to Pauletta directly. He showed me how she has been his anchor, how her faith has strengthened his own, and how their marriage has been a picture of Christ's love for the church. Behind the scenes, Pauletta Washington feels her knees go weak as these intimate truths about her marriage are spoken by a man who barely knows them. The Washington marriage had indeed been tested and strengthened through their shared faith journey. Pauletta had often been Denzel's spiritual compass during times when the pressures of Hollywood threatened to pull him off course. Their private prayer times together had been the foundation of their relationship, creating a bond that had weathered decades of challenges and kept their family grounded in truth despite the chaos of celebrity life. Denzel's composure finally begins to crumble visibly as the weight of these divine insights settles over him. A single tear escapes his right eye and rolls down his cheek, followed by another. His breathing becomes more labored, and his hands begin to tremble slightly. The cameras capture every nuance of this transformation, documenting the moment when one of America's most respected actors allows himself to be vulnerable before millions of viewers. But here's what broke my heart in the dream, Jonathan continues, his voice now thick with emotion. Jesus told me about the loneliness this man sometimes feels, how the very gifts that have blessed so many have sometimes become a wall that separates him from others. The words pierce through decades of Denzel's carefully maintained public image, reaching the core of struggles he has never articulated even to himself. The loneliness of leadership and success had indeed been one of Denzel's greatest challenges. Being constantly in the public eye, having every word analyzed and every action scrutinized, had created a sense of isolation that few people could understand. Even among fellow actors and celebrities, he often felt the weight of being seen as a role model, someone who always had to have the right answer and never show weakness or doubt. Jonathan's own experience of sudden fame through The Chosen had given him unexpected insight into the burdens that come with being in the public eye as a person of faith. The responsibility of representing Christ on screen had brought both tremendous blessings and unexpected pressures. Fan mail from people sharing their deepest struggles, requests for prayers and guidance, and the constant awareness that his every action reflected on his faith had taught him something about the isolation that comes with influence. Jesus wanted me to tell you something specific, Jonathan says, looking directly into Denzel's eyes with an intensity that suggests he's delivering a message from heaven itself. He sees your heart, he knows your struggles, and he's proud of how you've used the platform he gave you. The words hang in the air like a divine benediction, and Denzel's tears begin flowing more freely as decades of unspoken questions find their answer. Maria Santos realizes that her role as host has become irrelevant. She is simply a witness to something that transcends television journalism. Her usual impulse to guide the conversation or ask follow-up questions feels inappropriate in the face of what appears to be a prophetic encounter happening in real time. She silently prays for wisdom, something she has never done during a broadcast, feeling both honored and overwhelmed to be present for this moment. The dream had included specific details about Denzel's charitable work, particularly his quiet support of various ministries and his scholarship programs for underprivileged students. Jonathan describes seeing visions of young people whose lives had been changed through Denzel's generosity, their futures redirected toward purpose and hope through educational opportunities they never could have afforded otherwise. Each detail resonates with perfect accuracy, confirming the supernatural nature of this encounter. Denzel's philanthropic efforts had always been conducted with intentional privacy, guided by Christ's teaching about not letting the left hand know what the right hand is doing. His contributions to various causes, especially education and faith-based initiatives, had been structured to avoid publicity and recognition. Hearing these private acts of service acknowledged through prophetic insight moves him profoundly, confirming that God indeed sees and values the hidden acts of love. In the dream, Jesus showed me your future, Jonathan continues, his voice now carrying an otherworldly authority that makes everyone in the studio lean forward. He showed me projects you haven't even conceived yet, stories you'll tell that will reach the darkest corners of the world with light. The prophetic word pierces through time itself, offering Denzel a glimpse of divine purpose that extends far beyond his current understanding of his calling. Throughout his career, Denzel had felt periodic nudges from the Holy Spirit regarding specific roles and projects, though he had never spoken publicly about these spiritual promptings. Certain films had felt like assignments rather than career choices, and he had often sensed that his work was being used for purposes beyond entertainment. Hearing confirmation that this pattern would continue into his future fills him with both excitement and holy reverence. The studio cameras continue rolling, as what started as a standard celebrity interview transforms into something resembling a modern-day prophecy session. The technical crew, many of whom would describe themselves as secular or skeptical, find themselves deeply moved by forces they can't explain. Several crew members later report that they began attending church for the first time in years following this experience. Their lives mysteriously redirected by witnessing this divine encounter. Jonathan describes seeing Denzel in the dream not just as an actor, but as a modern-day prophet, someone called to speak God's truth through the medium of film and storytelling. The vision included images of audiences around the world being moved to tears, lives being changed, and hearts being opened to divine love through stories that Denzel would have a role in bringing to life. The scope of the calling revealed through the dream extends far beyond entertainment into the realm of evangelism. Jesus told me about your prayers for your children, Jonathan says, his voice gentle but penetrating. How you've wrestled with how to protect them while still allowing them to find their own paths. This touches on Denzel's deepest parental fears and hopes, the countless hours he and Pauletta have spent praying for wisdom in raising their children in Hollywood while keeping them grounded in faith and humility. The challenges of raising children in the entertainment industry while maintaining strong family values had been one of Denzel's greatest concerns throughout his career. He had often prayed for wisdom about how much to shield them from the industry's darker aspects while still allowing them to pursue their own dreams and callings. Hearing this private struggle acknowledged through divine revelation confirms for him that God is intimately aware of his deepest concerns as a father. Denzel's emotional walls continue to crumble as the interview progresses, his usual measured responses replaced by raw, authentic reactions to these supernatural insights into his life and heart. His breathing becomes more irregular, and several times he appears to be silently praying or processing the magnitude of what he's hearing. The audience watches, in respectful silence, as one of their heroes allows himself to be completely vulnerable before God and man. In the dream, Jesus showed me something about your legacy, Jonathan continues, seemingly unaware of the television cameras or the millions of people watching this unfold live. It's not the awards or the recognition that will matter in eternity. It's the quiet moments of obedience, the times you chose God's way over the world's way, even when no one was watching. This truth strikes at the heart of everything Denzel has tried to build his life and career around. The concept of legacy had indeed been something Denzel had wrestled with throughout his career, particularly as he had aged and achieved virtually every honor the entertainment industry could offer. The question of what would truly matter in eternity had kept him awake many nights, leading to deep conversations with God about the difference between worldly success and heavenly significance. Hearing confirmation that his private acts of obedience had been noticed by heaven itself overwhelms him with gratitude. Maria Santos realizes that her show's typical format has been completely abandoned, and yet she knows this will be the most watched and talked about episode in the program's history. The network executives in her earpiece have gone completely silent, recognizing that they're witnessing something that transcends normal television content. Social media is already exploding with clips and reactions as viewers around the world try to process what they're seeing unfold in real time. Jonathan's own emotional state is becoming increasingly intense as he continues to serve as a conduit for this divine message. Tears stream down his face as he describes seeing Jesus' deep love for Denzel in the dream. A love that encompasses not just his public achievements, but his private struggles, his moments of doubt, and his secret acts of kindness. The love of Christ is so overwhelming in the vision that Jonathan struggles to find words adequate to describe it. Jesus told me he wants you to know that every prayer you've prayed in the darkness has been heard, Jonathan says, his voice breaking with emotion. Every time you've questioned whether you were on the right path, every moment you've felt alone in your calling, he was there. These words address the deepest spiritual wounds in Denzel's heart, places where doubt and loneliness have taken root despite his outward success and confidence. The spiritual warfare that had often accompanied Denzel's career success had been a reality he rarely discussed but frequently experienced. Periods of inexplicable discouragement, attacks on his family relationships, and doubts about his faith had punctuated his journey in ways that seemed too coordinated to be coincidental. Hearing divine acknowledgement of these struggles and reassurance of God's presence during the darkest moments brings him profound comfort and validation. In the dream, I saw you as a young man, Jonathan continues, accessing memories and moments that he could never have known through natural means. I saw the moment you decided to use your platform for God's glory, even though it might cost you certain opportunities in Hollywood. The specific decision Jonathan describes happened during a private moment of prayer in Denzel's trailer, between takes of an early film, a moment when he consecrated his career to God's service. That pivotal moment had indeed occurred early in Denzel's career, when he was faced with choosing between a lucrative role that would compromise his values and a smaller project that aligned with his faith. His decision to prioritize integrity over money had established a pattern that would guide his career choices for decades to come. Though he had never spoken about that specific moment of dedication to anyone except Pauletta, the audience in the studio has become completely silent, many wiping away tears as they witness this extraordinary exchange between two men of faith. The usual sounds of rustling programs, whispered conversations, and shifting seats have ceased entirely. Even the technical crew members who are typically focused on their equipment find themselves transfixed by the spiritual drama unfolding before their cameras. Jesus showed me something beautiful about your relationship with him, Jonathan says, his voice now barely above a whisper, but somehow filling the entire studio. He showed me how you talk to him, not like a distant God, but like a friend, like a father who's always available to listen. This intimate detail about Denzel's prayer life touches on the very foundation of his spiritual journey and his understanding of God's character. Throughout his life, Denzel had indeed cultivated a relationship with God that was more conversational than formal, more intimate than institutional. His prayer times often resembled discussions with a beloved father rather than recitations of formal requests. This approach to spirituality had sustained him through decades of challenges and success, providing a grounding force that kept him connected to his true identity beyond his public persona. Jonathan describes seeing in the dream how Denzel's prayers had influenced his children, how his example of authentic faith had shaped their own spiritual journeys, even when they seemed to be rebelling or questioning. The vision includes images of family devotions, bedtime prayers, and countless moments when Denzel's consistent faith had planted seeds in young hearts that would bear fruit in ways he might never fully realize until eternity. The impact of his parenting had indeed been one of Denzel's greatest concerns and hopes throughout his career. Balancing the demands of his profession with his responsibilities as a father had required constant prayer and adjustment. Seeing confirmation through prophetic vision that his efforts to model authentic faith had been effective in his children's lives brings him immense relief and joy. In the dream, Jesus told me about a specific moment coming in your future, Jonathan says, his voice taking on an even more prophetic quality. A time when you'll be asked to make a choice that will define the final chapter of your career. The words carry weight that seems to reverberate through the studio, suggesting that this divine encounter is not just about the past and present, but about preparing Denzel for decisions yet to come. The prophetic nature of this revelation adds another layer of significance to what's already an extraordinary encounter. Denzel's eyes widen as he realizes he's being given divine insight into his future, guidance for decisions he hasn't yet faced, but that will apparently be crucial to his legacy and calling. The responsibility of receiving such specific divine direction is both humbling and overwhelming. Maria Santos realizes that her role as a television host has evolved into something more akin to a witness to biblical prophecy. She finds herself praying silently for Denzel as she watches the profound impact these words are having on him. Her usual professional demeanor has been replaced by genuine concern and awe, as she recognizes the sacred nature of what's transpiring before her cameras. Jesus wants you to know that your best work is still ahead of you. Jonathan continues, seemingly oblivious to everything except the divine message he's receiving and delivering. The stories you'll tell, the lives you'll touch, the kingdom impact you'll have, it's all been prepared in advance. These words of encouragement and destiny pierce through any sense of discouragement or questions about relevance that may have been troubling Denzel as he enters the later seasons of his career. The assurance that his most significant kingdom impact lies in the future rather than the past energizes something deep within Denzel's spirit. Throughout his later career, He had sometimes wondered whether his best contributions were behind him, whether age might limit his ability to reach new audiences or tell important stories. Hearing divine confirmation that his greatest work remains ahead fills him with renewed purpose and excitement. Jonathan describes seeing in the dream a specific project that will emerge from this very encounter, a collaboration that will surprise both men but will be ordained by heaven itself. The vision includes images of them working together on something that will reach millions of people and point countless hearts toward Christ through the power of authentic storytelling, combined with prophetic insight. Jesus showed me the ripple effects, Jonathan says, his voice filled with wonder at what he's been allowed to see. People watching this right now who will make decisions to follow Christ because of what they're witnessing. Lives that will be changed not just by the message, but by seeing two men allow themselves to be vulnerable before God on television. The scope of the divine purpose behind this moment extends far beyond the two actors to encompass viewers around the world. Denzel finally breaks completely, his famous composure dissolving as decades of hidden struggles, private victories, and secret prayers find their divine acknowledgement through Jonathan's prophetic words. His shoulders shake as he weeps openly, no longer concerned about maintaining his public image or protecting his reputation. In this moment, he is simply a man receiving love and validation from his heavenly Father through an unlikely messenger. The cameras capture every moment of this transformation, documenting what will surely become one of the most replayed and discussed television moments in history. Behind the scenes, crew members are weeping along with Denzel, many of them experiencing their own spiritual awakening as they witness the power of divine love breaking through the walls of celebrity and touching the heart of a man who has seemed almost mythically strong and composed. The final thing Jesus told me in the dream, Jonathan says, his own voice breaking with the weight of the message he's been entrusted to deliver, is that he's proud of you. Not for the awards or the success, but for the man you've become when no one is watching. For choosing love over fear, faith over doubt, and obedience over convenience. These words of divine approval wash over Denzel like a healing balm, addressing wounds he didn't even know he was carrying. As Jonathan finishes sharing the dream, an extraordinary silence falls over the studio that seems to extend beyond natural quietness into something supernatural. Denzel sits motionless, tears streaming down his face, his breathing deep and labored as if he's been running a spiritual marathon. The weight of divine encounter settles over the space like a tangible presence, and even the most skeptical observers sense they've witnessed something that defies natural explanation. The transformation in Denzel's countenance is visible and profound, as if layers of carefully constructed public persona have been stripped away to reveal the authentic man beneath. His eyes, red with tears, carry a depth of emotion that speaks to decades of private struggle and sudden divine relief. When he finally speaks, his voice is barely recognizable, thick with emotion and wonder. "How did you know?" Denzel whispers, his voice cracking with the weight of recognition and revelation. "Those things you said, the childhood moment, the prayers, the choices I made in private, how could you possibly know?" His question hangs in the air like incense, carrying with it the acknowledgement that something far beyond human knowledge has been at work in this moment. Jonathan looks at him with eyes filled with compassion and equal amazement at what has just transpired through him. "I didn't know," he responds softly, his own voice trembling with awe. "I was just faithful to share what I was given. This wasn't about my knowledge. This was Jesus speaking directly to your heart through a dream he gave me." The humility in his response only amplifies the supernatural nature of what has occurred. The studio audience erupts in spontaneous applause, mixed with tears and exclamations of amazement, but the sound seems muffled, as if the spiritual atmosphere has somehow changed the acoustics of the room. Some viewers are openly weeping, others are praying, and many are capturing this moment on their phones, instinctively knowing they've witnessed something that will be talked about for years to come. Maria Santos attempts to regain some semblance of professional control, but her voice wavers as she speaks. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've all just witnessed something extraordinary, she manages to say, her usual polished delivery replaced by genuine awe and confusion about how to properly respond to divine intervention during a morning television show. Denzel reaches across the space between their chairs and grasps Jonathan's hand, his grip firm and desperate, as if holding onto a lifeline thrown from heaven itself. "Thank you," he says, his voice thick with gratitude that encompasses not just Jonathan's obedience in sharing the dream, but God's love in providing such specific and personal encouragement. "Thank you for being faithful to deliver what he gave you." The physical connection between the two men seems to complete some kind of spiritual circuit, and both actors bow their heads simultaneously, as if receiving a final blessing or download from heaven. The cameras capture this moment of prayer and connection, documenting what appears to be a divine appointment that has been orchestrated far beyond human planning or intention. When they raise their heads, both men's faces are transformed, glowing with a peace and joy that seems to radiate beyond their physical beings. The studio lighting appears different somehow, as if the atmosphere itself has been sanctified by what has transpired. Crew members later report that the temperature in the room seemed to shift, becoming warmer and more comfortable despite the technical equipment. "I feel like I've been carrying weights I didn't even know were there," Denzel says, his voice stronger now but still thick with emotion. "And somehow, through your obedience to share that dream, God just lifted them all." His words carry the wonder of a man who has experienced supernatural healing in the most public way possible, yet feels no shame or embarrassment about his vulnerability. The moment reaches its crescendo as both men stand simultaneously, drawn by some unseen force to embrace. Their hug is not the typical Hollywood greeting, but something deeper, a connection between brothers who have been united by divine purpose. The embrace lasts longer than would be typical for television, but no one suggests they hurry, sensing that this moment belongs to God more than to broadcast schedules. As they slowly separate from their embrace, the spiritual intensity in the studio begins to settle into something more manageable, though the sense of holy presence remains palpable. Denzel wipes his eyes with the back of his hand, his famous smile returning but softer, more genuine than his usual public expression. "I came here to talk about a movie," he says with a gentle laugh, "and God decided to do surgery on my soul instead." Jonathan nods, his own emotions still raw from serving as a conduit for such a powerful divine message. "I had no idea this was going to happen," he admits, his voice filled with wonder at how God had used him. "I almost didn't share the dream at all. I was afraid it might sound presumptuous or strange." His honesty about his own hesitation makes the moment even more powerful, highlighting the courage required to be obedient to divine promptings. Maria Santos, still struggling to process what she's witnessed, manages to find her professional voice again. "Gentlemen, I think our viewers would agree that what we've just experienced goes far beyond typical television," she says, her tone respectful and reverent. "This feels like a moment that was orchestrated by something much bigger than any of us." Her acknowledgement of the divine nature of the encounter validates what everyone has sensed. The studio audience rises in another spontaneous ovation, many wiping tears from their eyes and openly expressing gratitude for being present during such an extraordinary moment. The applause carries a quality of worship rather than mere appreciation, as if the crowd instinctively understands they've been participants in something sacred rather than simply entertainment consumers. Denzel turns to address the camera directly, his eyes still glistening, but his voice strong and clear. "If you're watching this and you've been struggling with questions about your purpose, about whether God sees you or hears your prayers, I want you to know that He does," he says, his words carrying the authority of someone who has just experienced divine encounter. What happened here today is proof that God still speaks, still cares, and still intervenes in our lives in the most unexpected ways. In the days following the broadcast, both Denzel and Jonathan report that their lives have been forever changed by that divine encounter on live television. Denzel describes feeling a freedom and lightness he hasn't experienced in decades, as if long-time burdens have been permanently lifted from his shoulders. The private doubts and questions that had haunted his quiet moments have been replaced by an unshakable confidence in God's love and purpose for his life. Jonathan, meanwhile, has been amazed by the response from viewers around the world who have reached out to share how watching that divine encounter has impacted their own faith journeys. Thousands of emails and messages have poured in from people who decided to recommit their lives to Christ, to pursue their calling, or to trust God with their deepest struggles after witnessing the authentic spiritual breakthrough that occurred on live television. The collaboration that Jonathan saw in his prophetic dream has already begun to take shape, with Denzel reaching out to explore ways they might work together on projects that combine powerful storytelling with spiritual truth. Their unexpected friendship, forged in that moment of divine encounter, has opened doors for kingdom impact that neither man had previously imagined possible. Maria Santos has described that interview as the most significant moment of her broadcasting career, leading her to completely reevaluate her own relationship with God and her role as a media professional. She has since incorporated more faith-based content into her programming, recognizing that her platform can be used to facilitate divine encounters that change lives in ways that pure entertainment never could. The ripple effects of that extraordinary morning continue to spread across the entertainment industry and beyond, as other celebrities have begun speaking more openly about their own faith journeys and spiritual struggles. The vulnerability that Denzel displayed that day has given others permission to drop their carefully crafted public personas and allow God to work through their platforms in authentic, transformative ways. Perhaps you're watching this story and recognizing something in your own heart. A longing for divine encounter, a need for reassurance that God sees your struggles and values your hidden acts of obedience. What happened between Denzel and Jonathan that day wasn't just about two famous actors. It was a demonstration of how God still speaks to his children today. The question isn't whether God wants to encourage and guide you. It's whether you're willing to be open to receiving his love in whatever unexpected way he chooses to deliver it. If this story has touched your heart or reminded you of your own divine encounters, share your experience in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories of faith that will strengthen your walk